Alaska, at twice the size of Texas, is the largest state in the U.S. and has more acres of wilderness and publicly owned land than any other state. Home to spectacular wildlife, Alaska also offers a rich human history. This story reflects an interesting period before its official statehood, during the Alaskan gold rushes of the late 1890s and early 1900s, when thousands of miners moved to this harsh yet beautiful territory. The following story comes from the Memoirs of Nell Mathison Lake, who came with her family to the town of Hope on the Kenai Peninsula. This excerpt is read by her granddaughter, Judy Shipsey.
That second winter from the Chronicles of Nell Mathison Lake. 2 years passed, and the Mathesons settled into living and working in the harsh yet breathtaking wilderness. That second winter had little snow up till Christmas Day, when the storm obliterated trails and equipment. They all marveled at the beauty of it, but after a couple of days the wind came up, driving sleet before it, freezing everything solid. Claude got out for a hunting trip shortly after Christmas, but after 3 days he returned with a painful illness, every bone aching, his face flushed with fever. He had been in bed for the past 2 weeks. Ida had done all she could for Claude, dressed the children, and given them their breakfast. She put Maddie to washing the few dishes. She then took out the night slop jar to empty as far from the cabin as she could plod through the heavy snow. At last she was ready to leave for Hope. It was 10 o'clock. Bruce came bouncing toward her through the snow, but seeing his harness, darted away. "Bruce, Bruce! Here, boy, here!" she cried. And he came, head hanging like a reluctant child. Bruce wasn't a sled dog, and he knew it. He felt mistreated when he had to work. Only Claude could make him mind when he got stubborn. All Claude had to do was pick up a stick. "Stand still, Bruce," Ida ordered, as she hitched him to the sled, her hands clumsy in her wool mittens. "We're going to Hope, and you're going to behave yourself, you hear? Now mush," she called, and he took off willingly enough. Ida's mind was on Claude and the children. She had fed him broth from the moose bone she had had simmering on the back of the stove, but now she was afraid that her few remedies, a bottle of camphor, one of turpentine, and a small one of iodine, just weren't working. There was no doctor. She had to get some kind of medicine to break Claude's delirium. The children were afraid of Claude's rantings and damp, flushed face. "Don't go, please don't go, Mama," Maddie begged. "Take us with you." "Hush, Maddie, you know we can't leave Papa here alone," Ida said. "I'm dependent on you, Maddie. There's nobody else." She told Maddie to wipe Claude's face with a damp rag, and was pleased when Claude put up a shaking hand to touch Maddie's face. "All you have to do is give him some dinner when you feed the young'uns. I'm going to set this can of tomatoes on the table. You can have it for a treat for your dinner. I'm going to leave the butcher knife on this shelf. You know how to open the can. Just make 2 cuts crossways, then put the knife and hammer back out of reach." She hated leaving a can for Maddie to open, but she had heard that a body could get poisoned from food left in an open tin can. She gave them all a hug and looked back as she left. "I'll hurry fast as I can," she called. She guided Bruce over the trail dim under the snow. "Ha, ha," she called, and they fairly flew over the hard surface of the river. She stepped into the store to an odor of damp wool and unwashed bodies made more intense by the heat of the stove. She described Claude's pain and asked if there might be a medicine to help. The men nodded their heads in sympathy, but they couldn't help her. Old Mac stood up, and Ida looked over his tobacco-stained beard and patched woolen pants, stuffed in the laced-up tops of his worn moose-hide moccasins. He told her he had some herbs that might help, and he also had some laudanum. He went off to fetch them, and Ida purchased some supplies and clutched a letter from her mother, the Texas postmark 6 weeks old. She was so homesick she couldn't stand it. She untied Bruce and looked up at the pale sun. It would be down by 3 o'clock, and Bruce would have to pull hard to cover the 5 miles before dark. When she couldn't drag herself another step, she stepped up on the runners. Bruce pulled hard a few feet, and looking accusingly at her, he sat down. "Mush, Bruce, go on, mush!" she yelled. "I'll show you, you hateful dog, pulling that trick on me." Muttering to herself, she broke off a switch, and suddenly a flock of birds exploded into the air. Bruce went wild. Barking and lunging, he tangled himself in the harness, almost upsetting the sled. Stop it! Stop it! Shut up! Ida screamed, slapping at him with her mittened hand. Oh, just look what you've done, she sobbed, yanking him by his collar. She had to unhitch the sled to straighten the harness. Oh, I'm going to beat you! She gave him a whack, and he trotted ahead. Ida dragged along, her hands icy on the handles in spite of the wool mittens. There was still enough light for her to see smoke curling from the stovepipe as she neared the cabin. She unhitched Bruce with wooden hands as Maddie ran out to help bring in the things. Claude was groaning and muttering. God Almighty, he yelled. Ida hurried to measure laudanum into a spoon. She held it to his lips, and he swallowed. No need of you swearing like that, Claude, she told him. Don't help any. Papa hollered a lot, but he didn't try to get up. And I didn't hide, Mama. Honest, I didn't, Maddie reported. I knew you could do it, Ida said. I'm proud of you, the way you took care of everything today. I couldn't have gone if I hadn't had you to depend on. After she rested a bit, Ida opened the cornmeal and stirred up a pan of cornbread, bringing the smell of a Texas kitchen into the room as it baked. Supper was over, the children drowsy and quiet, and Ida set to work on the few tin dishes.